Hey everyone, I'm Sammy. I am a lifelong writer, among many other things, and today I'm going to teach you how to level up your writing. And that's not just about following the rules to make your writing stronger, although that is a very important piece of it, but it's also about finding your voice and pitching your why and strengthening what the purpose is behind what you're writing. Now, if you're a blogger or a small business owner, an entrepreneur, or a marketer, there might be a couple different reasons why you're watching this and you want to strengthen your writing. And I promise, no matter why you're coming here, you will get something out of it. You will find something valuable because I really tried to pack this session with as much information as possible. And I will mention right at the beginning that I do have a printable that goes along with this, a guide that you can download that has links to all of the resources that I talk about, and it goes into detail where the slides are a little sparse. So if you miss something, that's your opportunity to dive into that more. And of course, if you have questions, you can always email me, and that's sammy@dairyfreestate.com. Obviously, all one word. So why should you listen to me? Right? Like there's so many influencers and courses and marketers out there. So why do I know what I'm doing? Well, like I said, I have been a lifelong writer. And as soon as I learned how to write, I really never stopped. I wrote a 40-page autobiography when I was 9 years old. Okay? 9 years old. That's ridiculous. I think the page limit we were supposed to shoot for was maybe like 8 pages, 10 pages, something like that. No, I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to have entire chapters about me having chicken pox and going to Disney World and my birth. So I would stay after school late, and I would just keep working on my book until my teacher basically cut me off, and then I was left with 40 pages. So I've been writing ever since, really. I didn't start there, and I haven't stopped there. I also have over a decade of professional writing experience. My first paid writing gig was for a Canadian blogging company. I don't believe they are in business anymore at all, but it was a really good experience to get my feet wet. I wrote about music, and I wrote about a TV show I really liked, and I wrote 6 posts a week for a couple years, and my starting pay was $50 a month. And I remember being like, oh my God, I'm rich. I'm so rich. Which is kind of ridiculous now because that's like $2 a post. I started off making $2 a post, but I just thought it was so cool that somebody was paying me to do something that I would willingly do for free. And that was kind of a sign to me that I was in the right place, right? I knew that I was doing the right thing. I've also kept a personal blog since 2013. I write for Dairy Free State, which is all about living dairy free in the dairy state, thus Dairy Free State. I've got recipes and product reviews and interviews with business owners, book reviews, all kinds of stuff on there. I've got over 200 posts from the last 7 years, and I am continuing to grow it now. And I just started a podcast this year. We've got some really interesting content going. So that's always, one of my creative outlets. I also started a YouTube channel for it. So there's a lot more to come there. It's been a really fun project, and it's been interesting to see how it's evolved over 7 years and kind of where my priorities have shifted with it. I was a writing TA. So I taught media writing for 2 years when I was in grad school to aspiring journalism students. So I taught them how to write traditional newspaper articles, how to write feature articles for magazines, press releases, ad copy, social media posts, blogs, opinion pieces, you name it. I taught them how to do it in addition to teaching really basic rules of writing. So I taught it for 2 years. It helped me become a better writer and a better teacher, and I definitely practice what I preach. I've also written for a wide variety of industries. So, oh man, the list is long. Tourism, retail, hygiene products, construction equipment and construction supplies, logistics, garage door openers, food, health, telemedicine, hospitals, professional services, like you name it, and obviously marketing and writing, but I've written about it. I mean, I've really written about a little bit of everything. I would say my niche interests include health and food and professional services and marketing are kind of the topics that I write the most about, but I've really done a little bit of everything. And oh yeah, real estate too. I mean, really, the list is long. But I have learned how to research and write and adjust on the fly and cater my writing to certain audiences, because you have to have different voices and different audiences depending on your industry and their target personas, right? And I've also learned how to write and revise in a way that makes my clients happy. So that is a lot of learning that you really only learn by doing, but I'm hoping some of my advice will rub off on you based on all of those things that I've done. And people keep hiring me. So I think I know what I'm doing, which is good. I think I'm on the right track. So I'm going to try to help you based on the things that I have learned. And there's one thing that I do know, and that's that you need to improve your writing in order to build a strong presence, whether that's, a web presence or brand presence or a business presence or otherwise. Without good writing, you're going to lose good people. And that's just the way it is. People can get confused. They can get lost on the way to your message if they visit your website and they don't really know, like, well, what are they selling, or what do they want me to do? Or what are they about, or what makes them different? What makes them special? If they can't figure that out within the first 10 seconds, they're going to bounce off. So you need to solidify that quickly. And then that comes to solidifying your why. You should clarify in writing what you do and the purpose behind your business. So thinking about your why, and we'll go into this a little bit more later, but millennials and younger consumers, like anyone who's at that age, that generation or younger, so Gen Z, younger than that even, they're coming up and they're looking at making purchase decisions in a different way than older consumers are. And we're seeing that come out in their buying habits and the way that they answer surveys. So they're looking at the value behind what you're doing and not just what you're offering. So it's not just about getting something for an affordable price. It's, what makes this company different that I should support them? What kind of causes do they support, or what do they believe in? How do they source these materials? Do they take care of their employees? What does the diversity of the team look like? What does their leadership structure look like? There's all these little things that you could be working on in your company that they want visible and they want to know about. And that could really make the difference between them choosing you over a competitor. And whether it's a product or service, there are those things that exist that differentiate you, right? What sets you apart from others? Why should someone choose your product and service over competitors? That speaks to your purpose and the deeper meaning behind what you're doing. Because you're not just doing something, well, at least you shouldn't be. I mean, if you're a business owner, if you're a blogger, if you're starting your own business and you're not working for someone else, especially, you are passionate about what you do. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. It's not easy. You wouldn't do it. You would just give up. So if you're that passionate about what you're doing, it's not just about making money for you. There's a deeper reason behind what you're doing. Maybe it's to carry on some family tradition, or maybe it's to give back to your community or the environment, or maybe it's to make sure that people in younger generations are given the leadership roles that you wish you had, or, empowering people to make their own decisions about whatever it is that you're offering. There's all kinds of things that tie into that, but that is really important to get across in writing, because it is 100% making the difference for so many consumers these days between brand A and brand B. If brand B has a stronger purpose and like value-driven message, and that resonates with them, it aligns with what they also believe and feel, they're going to go with that every time. So those are things that I know for sure. Here are some things you can do. Now, these are more the nitty-gritty rules. So first, we got to go back to school. We have to talk about basic writing rules. And then we're going to talk about how we weave in that why, that purpose, those value statements. So first, what you really need to do is embrace shitty first drafts. And what I mean by that, shitty first drafts was a concept that was coined by Anne Lamott. And like I said, in the printable, I have a resource for shitty first drafts. And even to speak to shitty first drafts right now, because it's bugging me when I look at it, I realize that I quoted it improperly. My punctuation was off, but you know what? I embrace that. This is a draft. I can always go, if I present this live, I'll replace that and you'll never know. But you have to get something out, right? You can't, I did it on purpose, see? Because you can't let perfection get in the way of what you're doing. You can't stop yourself because you're trying to just get the perfect sentence out. Because if you sit there and go, well, I think good writers are people who they sit there, they get inspired, and words just flow out of them like water. Like that doesn't happen. And people who tell you it happens to them are lying to you. Now, Elizabeth Gilbert goes through this in Big Magic as well. We all get those moments of inspiration as writers where something just hits us and we have to get to a keyboard or have to get to pen and paper and jot things down as fast as we can. I've had those moments. She's had those moments. We've all had those moments, but they are exciting because they are rare. Most of the time, writing is not glamorous. It is not interesting. It is a slog. And you're just sitting there going, God, why can't I just write one sentence? I can't tell you how many times I just, I'll sit at my computer and be like, I just need to say something. And if I agonize too much about how to open something or how to close something, which in my opinion are the two hardest things to do, how do you open this and how do you wrap it all up at the end? Those are impossible. Getting out of your own way is embracing a shitty first draft, not worrying about how you open it, knowing that you can go back and change that opening later. So that's really important. Anne Lamott talks about, getting everything down, what the down draft looks like, cleaning everything up, the up draft. And then she talks about the dental draft, the little cosmetic changes that you make to a draft to get it exactly where you want it to be. So at the very least, you're going to be going through this 3 times, but you can keep editing and you can keep improving your writing, right? But you have to start somewhere and you have to not be worried about being perfect because you're not going to be perfect out the gate unless you have one of those rare moments of inspiration. But I wouldn't count on it because then you're never going to get anything done. But that brings me to kill your darlings. So if you're working on getting everything down on the page, that also means that you have to kill your darlings, which is a Faulkner quote and his idea for writing. You have to get rid of the things that you felt so precious about putting down on the page in the first place. Because if they're not making your idea as clear as it possibly can be, they need to go. You got to get rid of it. There's all kinds of things you can kill or change or revise in your writing, and these will all be in the printable, but here are just a few. So passive versus active voice, making sure you kill passive voice wherever you can. That's really important. So I always would use the example of I threw the ball. So that's subject, verb, object, right? I threw the ball. The ball is the object in the sentence. It's the thing being thrown, right? But if I say the ball was thrown by me, that's like a backwards motion. You're going, instead of the forward motion of you throwing the ball, it's a backward motion of, oh, this thing happened and then this person did it. And that is a really easy way to identify passive voice. You can identify passive voice by thinking about what direction is this happening, or does that subject get identified at the beginning or not? Or do you have to wait for that subject to be identified later in the sentence. Then you know it's passive voice. Another really good example of this is mistakes were made, which is something that politicians say a lot because they're passing the blame, right? They don't want to say, I made mistakes. So instead they're going to say mistakes were made to avoid that blame, or, like a toddler could say, the cookies disappeared from the cookie jar. Well, did they? The cookies were eaten. Well, who ate the cookies? Did you eat the cookies? Okay, then you should say, I ate the cookies, right? Otherwise, it's passive voice. So those are kind of goofy examples, but I hope you understand what I mean. Another thing to eliminate from your writing, wherever you can, are cliches. So the example I put in the printable is avoid like the plague, which is, of course, in itself a cliche. There are instances where cliches help kind of form a shortcut between what the idea you're trying to get across and the way that you're saying it. But think about it, especially if you have a wider audience, a more international audience. Cliches can be confusing. There are also people who process cliches, idioms, turns of phrase differently and take things quite literally. So, if you've got somebody who has that kind of idea in their head, they might also look at that sentence and get confused. So I'm not saying get rid of all cliches altogether, because there are a lot of things that are cliches that could also be fairly straightforward, but be mindful of when you're including them in your writing. Be sparing in including them and get rid of them whenever you can. Find a clearer way to say what you're saying. You don't have to say, I'm avoiding it like the plague. You could just say, I'm avoiding it. It gets the same point across. You don't need to always be so, you don't have to use hyperbole and cliches to sell a point if it's not that dramatic of a thing. Do you know what I mean? Another thing you can think about in terms of, this isn't necessarily getting rid of, but thinking about what you need to strengthen would be incorrect word choices. So obtained versus attained. That's a pretty common word mistake. Or principle versus principle with PLE and PAL. That one's really huge. Somebody just talked to me about a place where they saw that on a piece of content that I didn't create, but I do manage. And I had never noticed it. It just flew past me as well. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, whoever wrote this, and I'm not using passive voice. I don't know who wrote it. Not like I'm using it on purpose. But whoever wrote it didn't notice. And then I didn't notice because it's such a common word mistake that I didn't even think to look at it for a second. Or sneak peek and sneak peek, PEEK versus PEAK. And I've got a really cute resource on the printable, so definitely check that one out. It's a little comic gift for you for that one. But as well as the really common incorrect word choices like all of the theirs and tos, all of those, and the yours, its, right? A lot of those things are very common. People mess them up quite frequently. I see them on news outlets. I see them everywhere. And for people who are more particular, they might get turned off by that and not want to keep reading what you're writing. Sad to say. Another thing to think about is jargon and also any technical terms. So if I really hate terms like synergize or, I don't know, I'm trying to think of other ones quickly. Streamline, synergy, networking, whatever it is. The words that creep into our speak when we're in offices that we say to each other, but wouldn't necessarily write in order to get our point across, especially to people outside of our industry or outside of our area of expertise. Think about if you use an acronym that you use commonly in your industry, but your target market has no idea what you're talking about because it's so inside industry specific and they're just like customers and they have no idea what you're saying, you're going to lose people for sure. If they go on your website or look at one of your marketing materials and they've got to look up what it is you're talking about on Google every couple of sentences, they're just going to give up and move on. They don't have time for that. And I also believe that using too much jargon can feel disingenuous. If you're not saying what you need to say in the clearest way possible, it's getting lost, it's getting jumbled, and it can also sound fake. So if you think about, I kind of joked by saying synergize because I feel like that's the word that gets, kind of beat up on the most. But really, think about that. Synergize. Like, what does that even mean? Right? You could say something like, if you're trying to connect on something, just use the word connect. If you're trying to cooperate with somebody, if you're trying to form a partnership, right? There are better ways to say things instead of synergize, which is just a really vague way of saying things. So, think about that when you're writing. Don't use terms that aren't recognizable outside of your industry, and don't use terms that are real typical office-y terms that can just turn people off. Another thing to look at in your writing is weak starts. So phrases like there is, there are, she was, it is, just really simple to be starts are fine sometimes, but wherever you can avoid them, you should avoid them. So think about what's a stronger way to start the sentence outside of there is and there are. And it's going to depend on the sentence. And you don't need to make every sentence exciting, but what you want to avoid is having every sentence start with I am, he was, there were, our business is. That kind of repetition can get really draining. Filler words. So really very wishy-washy words like that, words that don't describe anything, those should totally get cut out of. See, totally. If I was writing, I would cut out totally, get cut out of your vocabulary and your writing vocabulary as well. I use a lot of filler words when I'm talking, and I'm very aware of it. But when I'm writing, I work to eliminate those to make what I'm saying even clearer. So do as I say, not as I speak. But also, words like utilize. That one's a big pet peeve for me. Some people don't mind it. It grates on me. Most of the time, utilize can be replaced with use, and you don't lose any meaning. I'd say there are very rare instances where I have decided that utilize makes more sense, but it really is just like a fancy way of saying use. So if you can say use, say use. It's more straightforward. You don't need to make your speech flowery. You don't want your readers to have to pull out a thesaurus to read your writing. That was something that I used to do when I was 9, is I would open up the thesaurus on Word and I would replace my words with fancier words. And that was all through my autobiography. And I can tell you, I don't do that anymore. So I learned my lesson after I was 9, because who did I think I was? But get rid of any word that doesn't mean anything and doesn't add anything to what you're saying. So those are just some really basic, kill your darlings pieces of advice. The other thing I would encourage is that you embrace and get help from tools and resources. So there's all kinds of tools you can look at to improve your writing, and resources that can help you, and books that you can read. And I have quite a few on this printable. I'm just going to share a few and you can get the rest on there. But Hemingway and Grammarly are great writing tools if you're looking for an extension, something that you can put your writing into and get direct feedback. Depending on what tool you use, there are different pricing structures and slightly different ways that they work. But I believe there is a free version available for both. But at the very least, Hemingway does have a free version, I know. And their focus is on short sentences, making sure you have sentence length variety, making sure you're not using passive voice, different things like that, making sure you've got correct punctuation, obviously, and correct spelling and all of that. Correct agreement, I think it also checks for. They also check for, both of them. So if you're looking for some backup and you don't want to poke your writer friend to help you punch it up, I would start with Hemingway or Grammarly. They're really useful tools. There's even some of that on Microsoft Word, to be honest, but it's not as good as those tools. Grammar Girl is another amazing resource. I've used Grammar Girl a lot when I'm teaching, or if someone has a question about a really specific concept, I go and seek it out on Grammar Girl because I love the way that she describes things. So I share Grammar Girl resources a lot. She has really good explainers on different punctuation types. Like there was one where it was like, okay, what's the difference between a dash and a parentheses and an ellipse? And that was very helpful for me thinking about kind of the different volume levels that accompany those things. And, thinking about different punctuation like commas, semicolons, and periods as different levels of rest in between sentences. So it helps you put these rules that can feel so arbitrary or so difficult into terms that make sense. She's very good at breaking things down in that way. So I definitely recommend Grammar Girl. And of course, if you're looking for a book, The Elements of Style, I think everyone should own The Elements of Style. It's a very quick read. It's a very short book, but the advice is timeless. And if you're looking for improving the style of your writing, The Elements of Style, you just can't go wrong. I've got it on these shelves for sure. At least one copy, if not a couple editions. Yoast. So in terms of SEO, because we've got to think about SEO too, right? That's one thing I failed to mention during Kill Your Darlings. Short sentences are not only good for comprehension, because they're great for comprehension, but they're also excellent because search engines, SERPs, really enjoy short sentences. They find them to be easy to read. The algorithm determines that short sentences will be easier for people to read. So you're already telling the search engines, hey, this is an easy to read post. And then as people come to it and they find it easy to read, then it just benefits you more because they'll spend a longer time on the page. That will show, Google, Bing, whatever, that people are spending time on your page, and then your ranking will go up. So short sentences are important for a lot of reasons, but that is one of them. Also think about things like bullets and lists and call outs. Those are also very SEO friendly. But Yoast will help you identify a lot of that. Whether you have the free or the premium version, you'll be able to see, it looks at things like how many words are in each section, how many subheaders does it have, what keyword are you targeting for, what's the frequency, how long are your sentences, what's the readability of this, what's the difficulty score, how much passive versus active voice, how are the transitions, did you start the same 3 sentences with the same word? Well, you should probably mix it up. So there's all kinds of stuff like that you can find with Yoast. SEMrush is another good tool, or Ahrefs, Ahrefs. They're both SEO tools that are paid but are good for research. And I know at the very least that SEMrush has a topic writing, like a content writing section where you can plan and write content in there, and it will tell you how formal or informal the writing is, what the voice sounds like, what other people that are ranking for those keywords are doing, how difficult it is to read, how many words you should be writing in order to try to rank. So it's a very powerful tool for things like that. Some of the blogs that I read frequently, one is Copy Blogger and one is Pro Blogger. Obviously, they're both about blogging and writing. Really good writing tips come through there, and both from, a quality writing angle and also from like a strategic and business angle. I also put the Oatmeal on here, which is a great comic. And if you go to the comic categories, there is a category of comics for grammar. Very good. How to read a book. If you want to write well, you have to read. There's no two ways around it. And the more you read, see all the books behind me, the more you read, the better you can write. And that is just proven time and time again. You know, as you're reading, you're absorbing the good habits of other writers, and you start to absorb their style and their cadence, and that can also help you identify, well, what voice do I want to write in? What am the authors I like? What do they write like? And what do they sound like? And you can try to emulate it, you know, and when it comes out in your style, it's going to come out slightly different. And then that's your own take on it. Or maybe you can say, I like what this one author does, and I like what this author does, and I'm going to take from this one this idea and take from this one this idea, and out emerges my own style. But you have to think about what your unique voice is that comes out from those influences, because you don't want to just like totally copy a style that's, you know, that's not fun, that's not original, that's not interesting for anybody. But the more you read, the more you'll pick up on those good habits and go, oh yeah, I really like the way that this writer structured this paragraph, and I'm going to try to do something kind of similar. It really is about reading and getting inspired and taking those ideas and building them into what you already know how to do. That's very important. And then I put Bird by Bird on here as well, because that's where the Shitty First Drafts idea comes from, and it's a book about writing, and it is also on these shelves. If I recommend something, also How to Read a Book is on these shelves. Any of the books I've recommended are books I've read, I should say. Oh, there's a couple more steps on here. I almost missed it. And these are really important steps. I can't miss these. So read your writing out loud. That's step 4. Step 2 and 3 were so long, I was like, well, I must be on to the next slide. Step 4 is read your writing out loud. And it's really important. And I don't care how stupid you sound, you need to do it. You really do. I read everything I write out loud before I send it, because that is how you make sure you haven't made mistakes. That's the only way you can guarantee that what you've written isn't clunky or awkward or confusing or, you know, downright incorrect. It is the best way to prevent those kinds of things from happening. I can't find another way around that. I just sit and I read everything that I write out loud before I send it. And if you can do this, and if you can find a writing buddy, it's even better if you can read your writing to other people. So I have some people who are kind of my writing buddies, and if I need that kind of help, I will send them something to review. They'll send me something back to review, and we can ask each other questions like, well, what did you get out of that? And what did you learn from that? And if they take away something different from your writing than what you were trying to get across, that's your sign that you didn't do it right and you weren't clear enough, and you should go back and be clearer. So that's a really good way to test what you're writing before you send it out into the world is, you know, test it with a person or two, test it with someone, especially if they're unfamiliar with your industry or what you're writing about, because chances are your audience will be at least somewhat unfamiliar with what you're writing about, and you should really write to the person who would be the most unfamiliar with what you're talking about to get them up to speed. So if you talk to somebody outside of your area of expertise, then they're going to be more constructive in telling you, oh yeah, I got that, or no, that was really confusing. So that's another thing to really think about. And with all of this, don't forget your why. I moved myself to the middle so that you could read the rest of this page. But don't forget your why. So Find Your Why is a great book to start if you haven't thought too much about your purpose. It's a good interactive book that'll help you get an idea behind why you're doing what you're doing. And this doesn't just have to be about your business. This could be why are you doing anything that you're doing. It really is just the purpose driven behind what you do. Start with why is more business oriented and Find Your Why is more individual. So you could use either one of them to get to the core of what it is that you're doing. If you're an entrepreneur, it should speak from, you know, both places, right? Find Your Why is best in a buddy system they'll have you interview somebody and take notes for them and then have that person do the same for you. So if you can find somebody who's interested in doing this with you, it's a really good activity to help you get to the core of what it is you're doing and why you do what you're doing. There's other books that can help you get to that as well. Like I mentioned, Big Magic. She talks about creativity and the purpose behind that. And you could kind of think about how that ties into the core of your being as well if you're in a creative field. So, find a book that resonates with you. That's not the only one, or they're not the only ones, but just a good place to start. Also think about your unique selling proposition, right? So some people call it a USP, or your positioning, or your differentiation, or your, unique offer, or something like that. There's all kinds of different ways that people could describe this, but really what it boils down to is what makes you different from your competitors. And you might know that. So after you do an activity like Find Your Why, you might be like, oh, well, I know that, the things that make me different are that I manufacture clothing using organic materials, and I pay all of my workers a living wage, and everything is produced in the United States. And we take the wastewater that's produced from our plant and we turn it around and we purify it and we turn it into a box water. I don't know. That's a little intense, but you see what I'm saying. So you could think about, these are all the things that make me different, but what's at the core of that? Sustainability, green living. So, we can talk about how that business is working on being more sustainable to be kind to the environment. And in Find Your Why, Simon Sinek talks about this a little, where he interviewed somebody who, I think he had like an aluminum company or something like that. And that was behind his why as well, where he's like, well, the materials are sustainable, they can be recycled, blah, blah, blah. But when he really boiled down to it, the root of everything was, well, I want there to be a world to live in for my grandkids and my grandkids' grandkids. And I want there to be a place for them. So I want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to give back. And in my small way, I'm doing that with my business. And doesn't that sound so much more interesting than just I'm selling these aluminum products or these shirts that are comfy or that are, like strong enough for whatever. I mean, aluminum isn't necessarily a strong product, but versatile, or, like lightweight and, perfect for these certain kinds of building projects, whatever it is. So you've got to think about beyond just the, like I sell ice cream that tastes good. I sell ice cream that has these types of ingredients that can help promote these things. And, it's the healthier side of ice cream. And I figure it's good to indulge, but also engage in healthy habits, but not deny yourself something that's going to make you happy in the process. Whatever it is, like you have something. My point is, you can think of something that makes you different, something that sets you apart from others, and a way that ties to your deeper purpose, the reason behind you doing what you're doing. Because like I said, if you run your own business, you're passionate about it. And you're not just doing it for fun or to make money. There is a bigger reason behind what you're doing. Maybe it's that you embrace innovation, or you like to empower people to, live their dreams or have certain ideas, or you want to improve the lives of other business owners. Like there's all kinds of ways that this contributes. I'm just trying to come up with more examples so that you can see all of the ways that this really could play out. Now, if you have no idea and you're just like, I don't know what my unique selling proposition is, I'm just not sure about any of this. One of the things you could do is survey your current clients and ask them, well, what do you take out of what I'm doing? What value do you get from my activities, my services, my products? And they'll tell you, you can just out and out ask them, well, why did you decide to buy my product or go with my service over my competitors? What made me stand out? Because a lot of the times they can see it better than you can. They can see outside of you when you're like trapped inside your own thing and you're just like, I don't know. I'm not sure what makes me special. You can also review if maybe you don't have a lot of clients yet, or there's just no one you feel necessarily comfortable asking, because I know it can be scary to ask your clients questions, but they're very likely, if they had a good experience with you, they're more than happy to share that with you. I know I'm always happy to share that with people. But if that freaks you out, or you're just looking for more data, what you can do is look at competitor websites and see, well, what do they talk about their unique selling propositions? What do they do that's different? And, versus, looking at what they say, where do I fit in there? And what's my niche and where can I edge in? Because I hate the idea that it's a competitive landscape and there's not room for everyone to succeed. I don't like that scarcity mentality, and I don't think it's true. I believe that everybody has the opportunity to succeed in a way that supports like a living wage. So yeah, of course it would be nice if we were all, able to be Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, but that's just not realistic and not going to happen for most of us. But think about, Seth Godin kind of talks about, getting those groups of raving fans, those people who just love everything you do and are all about everything you put out. And you don't need that many of them. If you're selling a product, maybe you need 1,000 who are just all about everything you do. If you sell a service, maybe you need like 10 to 20 a year to keep yourself going. I mean, really think about that number. It's not like you have to reach out to the entire world, and you're not speaking to the entire world, right? That's really important. You're not speaking to the entire world. You're speaking to a target audience. So think about what makes you different and where you can edge in, because there is totally room for you. There's space for you. You have a unique voice. You've just got to put it out there in a way that other people can recognize and understand, right? So, I worked with a teacher who talked about kind of what she teaches on a spectrum, and she used a pen. And I won't talk about exactly what it is that she teaches, because it's not that important to this metaphor, but she was saying like there's extreme beliefs on this end and this end of what it is that I teach. And then there's some people in the middle, and she's like, and I'm kind of here. I'm kind of in between the middle and one of these extremes. And that is where I teach, and that is what I talk about. It's in this area, and that's who I speak to. And that's my audience. And you know what? If people aren't here and they're not into that, that's okay, because there's the rest of the pen, right? But the people who are here and they hear me, they're going to resonate with my message, and I'm speaking right to them. And it's not getting muddied up, because I'm not trying to write all of this stuff. I'm not trying to say all of these things. I'm just saying this one thing. So think about that. There is that place for you. There is that message for you. And yeah, not everybody is going to like it. And not everybody is going to want to buy whatever it is that you're selling. But that is okay, because you have a wide world to pull from. And, depending on your business, you might have audience all over the world. Another thing that I do besides writing and marketing and all that is I actually stream on Twitch. And so I play video games, I host trivia, I do crafting, I do all kinds of stuff like that. And I present live to people from all over the world. And on any given day, people from all different countries might stop in, especially if I'm playing later at night. That's usually when I get an international audience. And it doesn't matter where they're coming from. If they love what I do, they'll stick around. So I do have people from several different countries who watch me on a regular basis. And that's just the nature of what I do. So don't think of yourself as limited. Don't think of yourself as living in this competitive, rough landscape. There is all of this stuff that you can access. There are all of these potential customers and clients that you can reach with your message, and being targeted isn't scary. You should be targeted with your message. Being specific isn't scary. You should be specific with your message. And I'm really repeating this because I think that is where I see people get scared the most often. That's what I've dealt with with clients the most often is they're like, well, we want to make sure we speak to everybody because we don't want people to think that they can't use our business. But the weird thing that happens, and I've seen this happen time and again, is if you speak to a specific person or a specific group of people, you're actually going to attract a wider audience than if you just speak in broad terms and aren't speaking right to anybody. So that brings me to my next point, and that is coming up with a persona. So I'm sure you've heard about personas before, and I'm planning on going in depth with personas in a future video, but something to think about in terms of personas is the way that you craft it can come from either your current clients and what you know about your current clients. So you could form conclusions about them based on their buying behavior or the things that you've talked to them about or the messages that you've sent that have resonated with them, and you can tell because there was an uptick in sales. Or you could interview them, you could send them surveys to get to know them better. There's all kinds of things you can do. Or you could craft a persona around a dream client that you would like to have that you don't have yet. So there's all kinds of things you can do with personas, but you could get pretty specific. You could say, well, this is Billy and she is really into farmers markets and Whole Foods, and she buys a lot of beeswax products and she makes her own sourdough bread and soap. And so I know she is really going to go for these beeswax wraps that I made that can go over food and store it in a sustainable way. I know, I don't know why sustainability is on the brain, but that's just what's on the brain. So just roll with me. So I know that if I speak to her about these other things that she likes, and I speak from her own experience, and I use the language she's used to, I work in things that are part of her day to day, then that's going to resonate with her. She's going to hear that and she's going to want to buy my product, right? So you could say after a trip to the farmer's market and you get that really huge zucchini that you don't know what to do with, and you want to make sure that you can use all of it, instead of using plastic wrap on the end, once you cut the portion that you need for your meal, why don't you wrap it with beeswax? It's a nice sustainable alternative. You can get back to it tomorrow and it'll be just as fresh as when you put it in the fridge. Boom, and then Billy reads that and she's like, oh my God, I did want to do that. That sounds great. I'm going to buy that today, but really the more specific you get, the more you think about the things your, consumers, your dream clients would be interested in, the better. One of the things that I talk about in terms of like professional services, and this could work for a coaching business or whatever, is you think about the pain points. Think about what keeps your customers up at night. What keeps them tossing and turning and going, oh my God, I still have to deal with that or whatever. And what pain points can you take away with your services? Well, you don't have to worry about those back office tools. You don't need to worry about the strategy because we're going to take care of that. All you have to do is tell us what your goals are, provide a budget, and we're going to create a whole strategy and implement it for you. And it's done for you so that you can get back to doing what you do best, which is managing your business. Whatever it is, right? You can think about what's important to them, what their values are, what keeps them up at night, what problem you're solving. And then that goes beyond just like, this is the product that I'm selling or the service that I'm promoting. It's much more important than that if you do it that way. And then one thing that you should remember is that your why and your unique selling proposition can change over time. So you can start somewhere. I always talk about MVP, minimum viable product. You can always start somewhere and then it could evolve or change over time. And that's totally okay too. So don't be afraid to change with your ideas changing or your offerings changing or realizing that something is resonating more and it still feels unique to you. It still feels genuine to you. It's okay to change a little bit. Don't ever be afraid of doing that. And then last, what I'm going to leave you with is what you should think about in terms of crafting that why and putting it throughout what you do. The best way to do it is think about, the concept of the elevator pitch, but broaden it a little bit. So instead of just, so for the uninitiated, I think most people know what an elevator pitch is or have heard the term before, but say you're getting into an elevator with somebody whose money you want, right? They're an angel investor, or they're a CEO and you want to impress them with your new idea because you want to rise in the ranks. Or, they're a dream client that if they, paid for your service or your product, that you'd be so successful in no time. And you only have 30 seconds in that elevator to tell them exactly why you're important and what you're doing is important. And you need to get that idea across in 30 seconds or less. Well, now attention spans are shorter, like I said, or also think about, depending on the type of content that you're trying to get across, if it's a video versus a blog post, a long form blog post, or an email or a tweet, you have to get it across in a different number of characters or words, or a slightly different structure. So I would say, once you figure out your why and your unique selling proposition, this is why I'm here, and this is why I'm important, and this is why you should care about it, then think about how that fits in terms of a sentence, a paragraph, a 30-second clip, a 15-second clip, a page, a tweet. Come up with as many varieties as you can for that, so that you can just create a master document like that, and then just slot that in wherever you go and just shoot that out into the universe. That is a really good way to just always have that in your back pocket and always be thinking about it. And if you have that like short, snappy thing that you can say to people when they talk to you about your business, in Find Your Why, it's like, oh no, I'm trying to remember. It was like, this by doing this or whatever, so you can think about it, or like I blank so that blank, I think. So think about how short you could really make that statement, where you can kind of slip it into conversation and people might not even notice it, but you're weaving it in and out of what you're doing. That is a really valuable thing to think about. So I know that this was a lot to cover. Like I said, you're going to have a printable resource to look at that links to a lot of the things that I've talked about, that has more bullets than these slides have. So hopefully that helps you. And I hope you've thought about now, what you need to be thinking about in terms of going back to school and then also getting to the deeper purpose about what you're doing. And from here, my plan is to create more in-depth videos as I go along for each point. So once you get through this video, you'll be able to dive deeper on any areas where when you heard me speak, you went, oh, I want to know more about that. I'm not really sure, what the detail is on that. Not to worry. There's going to be more detail coming and more instructional videos coming. So if you like what you see here, keep an eye out for those follow-up videos, or depending on when you're watching this, there may be follow-up videos already available. So thank you for your time, and I hope you walked away with at least one good nugget. That's always my goal from like a webinar or a course. If I can walk away with one good nugget that kind of swims around in my brain all day, then it was worth my time. So I hope you came away with at least one good nugget, if not several. I hope the resource is useful to you, and I hope this has inspired you to get those shitty first drafts done and get out of your own way and find ways to connect to your deeper purpose. And with that, I thank you, and I will see you next time.